Hello there and welcome to another little one-by-one tutorial here at Gen VFX. I'm Gary. Hello. And what we're going to talk about today is about the bevel tool. This is, again, a bit more powerful than people give it credit for, the Bevel Modifier, not bevel tool, purely because it's non-destructive and allows you to do lots and lots of different things. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the bevel tool and look at it in relation to what we can actually create really quickly, really fast within Blender. So here we are again in Blender 2.91, and I'm going to click off that. So we now have our light and we have our camera, lights, camera, action. We have our cube. So I'm going to get rid of the camera and I'm going to get rid of the light. So I'm just going to stick to this lovely little default cube, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about bevel modifier. So I'm going to add a bevel modifier to this cube, and straight away with the standard settings it just bevels the corners. It modifies the edges of your geometry to add more information to the edges, which allows you to sometimes soften things off. It's a very, very good way of making what is essentially a good model suddenly look like a great model, and of course it's non-destructive. Now some people will say, what's the use of a non-destructive bevel modifier? I don't want to bevel all the edges, I just want to bevel the ones that I want to pick. We will get to that. But first of all, let's very quickly talk about what we mean by some of the things that are in here. Fundamentally, the top part of bevel is vertices, so it picks all the vertices in the object. So if I change this, it makes it bigger. There you go. Creates a nice little shape. Now remember, this is a 2 by 2 meter box. Keep that in mind, because a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is in relation to this amount button here and the width type. So we have vertices, which I just mentioned there, and we have edges, which of course is the one that most people tend to use. If I just stick up the segments, a couple of segments, we get something that kind of looks kind of nice. Let's just pick this object and go smooth, so it's nice and tidy. But let's also just make sure we don't get these awful faces here. So let's go to these normals and set the auto smooth to about 45. Is that working? Oh, I suppose it is. There you go. Yeah, that's better. That is, it must have been just the angle that I had it at. That's okay. And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to just very quickly turn on the wireframe so we can very distinctly see what the bevel modifier is actually doing. So here we go. Let's go back up here, and we're going to look here at some of these controllers here for the width type. Now at the moment we have an offset of 0.1, segments of 3. I'm going to just change this back to one segment very, very quickly. And we're going to talk about offset, width and depth. Now if we were to look at this 2 by 2 box and we set the amount of this to 1 on offset, that shifts everything from the corner inwards and the corner inwards to a value of 1, which basically pulls them in. Okay, very quickly, I know this is a little bit of grease pencil-y time for you, but if I was to draw a line from, say, here down to there, let's just make that black so we can see what we're doing. Now, imagine that this is a 1 here, and that's like 1 there on this object. So if I set that to 1, it's going in that angle, going in that direction, as it were. But that is actually the width of the bevel. That's how the bevel. That's the width of the bevel. We're looking at the moment at offset. So just to explain what we have here, we have 3 essential distances on this triangle. We have this length, which is the width of the bevel. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Which is the width of the bevel. We have this one here, which is the depth of the bevel. And then we have this one between these 2 points, which is the offset. So when you're using a bevel tool, think about this, because this actually is where using maths correctly will give you a better accuracy. And at the end of the day, if you're building something which essentially has to be accurate, for example, say the pistons inside of an engine, or something which, because these are things that got to fit together really, really tightly. So if I just then reduce this, you see that's the offset. So what we're looking at is this distance here. So an offset of 0.27, that's 0.27. An offset of 0.5, that is 0.5. An offset of 1, that is 1. Which is why, now we know that's along there, that is exactly 2 meters from there to there, so it's just 1. So if we change this to width, this now, if I set that to 1 now, you'd think it might be the same thing, but no, it doesn't. This length here is our width, which is the same width, that's 1 meter. And then we do here, we go to depth, and you can see that's going in, that says 1 meter, but actually it's not. It's actually less than 1 meter, because once it reaches a point where it's, there you go, it's 0.71 in. It can't go any further in, because to go in a meter, the box would have to be probably like 2.7 or 2.8 units to actually accommodate that depth being 1. So they all work in a slightly different way, but that's not a bad thing. That's what works really well for us. We like things like that. We need to have things like that. Things of maths. Good stuff. Yeah. So let's just come in here and let's just erase our annotation. We don't need to see that now. That's all out of the way. And what we're going to talk about now to do with the other two is percent, obviously, which is the percentages it can go, about halfway. 50% is the width, because obviously the box has got an offset of 2. The percentage of 50% means it's halfway across the entire object. If it was a smaller object, bigger object, it would have, 50% is still 50%. It's not distance dependent. And then absolute, which is essentially another form. It's another form of offset based on them. So, but I'm going to go back here to offset and keep working on this one. And I'm going to increase the number. I'm going to take that up to just to the 1 meter. I'm going to increase this to about 4 or 5. Now you'll notice that we suddenly have a sphere, but we can use this as a tool to animate it from a box to a sphere. So actually, you can use the bevel for handy little sort of like motion graphic animations. So you can actually have a box, or even a box with slightly curved corners, and then pop it down to a circle. Or consequently, if you had it as a rectangle a bit further along, and you did that down, you could pop it down until it would turn into a lozenge. So each of the edges would be completely perfectly semi-spherical on either edge, but there'll be a box in the middle. So it's very handy for creating like little motion graphics, lower third backgrounds, if you see what I mean. Right, now I'm just going to increase this up here. But what I'm going to do is change the limit method from here, not to angle, but I'm going to change it to weight. Now immediately you notice that the box becomes a box again. So if I do this, nothing's happening at all. And the reason for that is because at the moment, the edge weight, that limiting method that this has got, actually is set to 0 on every single edge. So this is where people who think that the bevel modifier isn't very useful actually ought to think again. If we now go to edit mode, you can see here the bevel weight, and the mean bevel weight, and the mean crease. If I pick this, if I change this to number 2 and pick that, and then adjust the bevel weight, you can see underneath the actual object that I am beveling just that to a value of between 0 and 1. Now that's because it's saying I'm either 100% off or 100% on. So I can then change that bevel there and increase that to say 2, because that's probably the maximum I'm going to be able to get from the object. Well, it is, because it's a 2 by 2 meter box. We are working on offset, which essentially is the edge along the leading edge, so we'll work on that. So if I bring that bevel weight down to 0.5, we get a nice rounded edge as if it's like some sort of unit. And I'll pick this one and this one, and we'll increase those a little. We start to get something that is curving in a little bit more, if you see. And then if I take this bottom one and I do the same again, do a little bit more on that one, we end up with something which is, it's got some nice hard edges and some nice soft edges. And let's just increase the number of those. And I'm just going to take this edge and this edge and this edge again, and I'm going to type in 0.5. So you can see now that we've got, if I just pop it back to object mode, we've got a nice kind of buttony sort of thing. If I bring down the amount that this is being affected, the actual amount that the offset is, we've definitely got something which is more like, as I say, like a button. But essentially this could then be animated to do interesting bits and bobs. And that is where, in my opinion, the true power of this comes from. It's good though. You can do different things. It's that we can have different materials on faces as well. So if I go and we go to the shading area here very quickly, and there's our principal shader. So we have a principal shader, and we have, so it's red for the sake of argument. And then what we do is we go into our shader here. We add another material, and we'll make that another principal shader. And that is currently, let's just call this edges. We go back here, and we go to this, and we push this. And you'll notice that at the moment the material index was set to -1, and I'm going to shift this around because when you have multiple shaders and objects, the order that they come in is based, well, it's just a, numerically, it's like, well, the base shader is that material, and there's another one here called edges. So if the base material has got this on all the way through the red, if I then go and the edges, if I just move it to behind it like that, so that's now, if this essentially is the 0 shader, because that's the first thing that was put on, that's now, so that's a 0, that means the edges go to that lovely little white. We actually have a different shader on the edges. We can also harden the normals a little bit, and we can start mucking around with the profile. So when, in terms of the profile, what that means is that we can shift the, at the moment it's a super ellipse, so I can push it in, and I can push it out, and I can keep on all the way going until it almost goes right the way back to being square again. And if we put the wireframe at the top of that, you'll see what I mean. If I bring that down, we go, we get into the custom, we get into here, and we're going totally flat again. What we can also do here, if I set that back to 0.5, we can put on a custom bevel. I'm going to add a lot more segments in here so you can see how this is very useful for if you're doing something like a photo frame. So I'm going to bring this down, and you see here, I'm going to bring this down, I'm going to push this one out, and then that one in, and then this one out. And we start to get something that feels a little bit like a photo frame. Obviously that's a very small photo with a very deep back. So what we need to do is go back to our edit mode on our box, take those edges. So I need to really do this in wireframe, select everything, and then deselect everything in the middle, and then we go SX and then pull, so it's SX and then pull. And then if we do the same thing again, but this time deselect in the opposite direction this way, go S, Z, pull, and here, very quickly, let's just go to Z6 again, go back into the shaded mode, and then back into the object mode. You can see what we have here is something very, very more conducive to a photo frame. And then of course, you know, we can keep this as it is. We can go back to edit mode, we can pick this face. We can, if we want to, we can actually, you know, do some extrusions on here. But you know, you can, again, it's like a very, very quick way to generate something very, very fast, very, very pretty. And if I go back here to slot number 1, we can mess with this shader, and we can say make this a bit of a brown, reduce saturation slightly. Go back to slot 1 for the edges, and then we can say, well, imagine it's more metallic. It's not actually white, it's sort of a dark grey. It's not very rough. So we have a kind of a metallized edge. And you say, right, that's it, I'm happy with that. You could actually bake the whole thing down. Or if you're not and you want to just edit it a bit, you just go, all right, well, actually, I could really do with that being a bit higher like this. That can come in, that can go there. Let's move this one in, let's move that one there. Let's move that one in and that one there. And that feels even more like an actual photo frame. Then you can just do that. Bevels are really, really good. And again, it's some way of making stuff really quickly without too much bother. We can also make them, there you go, arc. So we get nice round corners as well. The major reason that I love Bevel is that it kind of does a better job than using a subdivision surface if you're building things to get a really nice object. It's really, really, really lovely. And particularly on something, say, like, well, for hard surface modelling, for hard ops, it's better than using a subdivision surface. You do get the round bits that you want, and you don't get all the amount of messy vertices you get all over the place. You're only getting them where you need them. I mean, this is a prime example. I'm only getting the vertices and the points around the edge of the frame. I'm not getting them on the other stuff because I don't need them there. That's a nice, neat way of turning a box into a picture frame, but it could be used for all sorts of things. Anyway, I hope that's been of some use to you. Just stop this and stop it from spinning around. Just keep on looking at all these lovely highlights and going, ooh, and ah. Yes, getting carried away. Anyway, there you go. That's what you can do with the Bevel Modifier. Anyway, I hope that's been of some use. So,